My name is Roger Benz. I'm the program manager for G Suite Accessibility. And as a program manager, I do things that are traditional program management type of activities. I set up processes and procedures for the teams. I also manage projects. I also, being involved in accessibility, I do advocacy, education, training, and also do some speaking at conferences like this. In my role, I get to work with a lot of different people, including like the product team. So I get to work with the product managers, the UX designers, the engineers, the QA, and from time to time, lawyers. I also work with people externally, including like our salespeople, but also advocacy organizations and individuals and users, because it's also important for us to get feedback from our users. I myself do accessibility for a couple of different reasons. One, it's important, and it has a lot of impact on people's lives. For example, for getting an education, you need to be able to access the information and technology. For career advancement, and also just for staying in touch with your family, friends, and community. I also have a personal connection to accessibility. I suffer from retinitis pigmentosa, and over a span of like 20 years, I went from having normal vision to the point now where I have basically no vision at all. So if I look out in the audience, I don't see anybody, so I actually hope somebody's out there. But hey, I heard some voices. Go ahead. Cool. So before I get started, I also like to do a little bit of poll to get a sense of the audience. So, and also since I'm blind, instead of raising your hand, I like for people to go ahead and clap. So if you're involved in education, can you go ahead and clap? Cool. All right. If you're involved in public sector, clap. Okay. And if you're involved in enterprise and business, can you go ahead and clap? Okay, cool. Ah, nice distribution of people. That's great. Also, I'm interested, how many people here directly use accessibility features themselves? Go ahead and clap. A few. And how many people are involved in actually providing accessibility services to users? Okay. Okay. And how many people here are just curious? A few. Okay. Yeah. So interesting thing that I've noticed that after I've gone blind, I actually hear more applause than I used to before. Okay, so one last question. How many people are ready to hear about accessibility features in Chrome and G Suite? All right, cool.
Page change. Slide 2 of 39, agenda.
So in my agenda today, I'm going to go through and cover the Chrome accessibility features that are built into Chromebooks. I'm going to talk about G Suite accessibility features. I'm going to do a short demo period, and then I'll give you some resources that you can look at after we leave here, and then we'll open up for Q&A. A couple things about my presentation. You may have heard when I went from the slide that you heard synthesized speech. That's because as a blind person, I actually use a screen reader, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. So actually what you're hearing is what my experience is, that I just hear the title of the slide when I go through it. Also, I've turned on our feature, which is in slides. When you're in presentation mode, it'll caption your voice. So hopefully the computer is doing a good job of putting into text what I'm actually saying.
Page change. Slide 3 of 39, Chromebook accessibility features. Page change. Slide 4 of 39, accessible out of the...
So Chromebooks come in many different styles and varieties, and from different vendors. You can have some that are small or lower cost, that may be in the range of $150 to $200. Or you can have higher-end ones that have bigger screens, more RAM and stuff, and some that have a really, they put a lot of investment into the chassis and stuff, and you can get them up to, like, say, over $1,000. You can, get them from vendors like Lenovo, HP, even Google offers a couple of Chromebooks as well. But the one thing about all of these Chromebooks is the accessibility features are built in. You don't have to download and install, say, magnification software. You don't have to install screen reader because it's already built into it. So today, I did come with my own Chromebook, but it had one here that I could have walked up to it and turned it on and started using it. So, one of the things, like, if you want to be a prankster, one of the things you can do is go into, like, a Best Buy, go up to the Chromebooks, turn on the screen reader, then walk away and see what people do. But that's just an idea that everything is built into it. But if you do turn it on, don't tell them that's because Roger told you to.
Page change. Slide 5 of 39, making things easier to see.
So one of the things for doing for accessibility is to make things easier to see.
Page change.
And we have several different ways of doing this. And as I lost my vision over the years, I ended up using basically every one of these capabilities for accessibility. So even though at this point I just use a screen reader, I just am aware of these. So the first thing you can do is in the Chrome browser itself, you can do what we call browser magnification. This is where you do Control plus the plus sign to increase the text font. And that'll be just within the browser content itself. Say like if you're in Calendar and you want to increase the font size, you do the Control plus. If you want to reduce it back to what you had, you can do Control minus to reduce it, or you can also do Control plus 0 to reset it back to 100% magnification.
Page change. Slide 7 of 39, increase size of all items.
So one of the other things you can do is if you don't want just the content, but you also need the other parts of the system increased in font size, for example, the tool tray or the system tray or the tab titles themselves. Here you do kind of the same thing, but you add a shift key to this. So you do Control Shift plus to increase the size of everything that's on the screen.
Page change. Slide 8 of 39, turn on built-in full screen magnifier.
And for some people, doing the text magnification isn't enough. For example, you want larger magnification. Or, as you magnify sometimes the text, it'll start to overlap. So there's a different way you can do this is what's called full screen magnification. And one way to think about this is what it does is it basically takes like your screen and it becomes a magnifying glass that you can kind of rotate and move around over your content. So you can say, see just one upper left corner or the bottom right corner, but then you can see it magnified at, I believe, up to like 20x magnification. So you can get very large content magnification. And when you do that, turn on the magnification feature, you can adjust it on the fly. For example, you can press Control, Alt, and 2 fingers on the touchpad and increase and decrease the magnification as you go.
Page change. Slide 9 of 39, use the dock magnifier.
We have another variation of the magnification is what we call the docked magnifier. And when you turn this on, the upper 1/3 of your screen becomes the magnification portal. And then the rest of the screen shows you your content or your screen at normal size. So then, as you say, move your mouse around on the screen, the magnification portal will magnify the area around your mouse, the mouse itself and the content around it. The same thing, it'll kind of track the cursor as you're typing and put that into the magnification portal.
Page change. Slide 10 of 39, adjustable mouse cursor.
And I know that when I first started losing my vision, one of the things I do is I kept losing that stupid mouse. So because it was so small that I could barely see it. So I'd end up having to take the mouse and slam it up in the corner and the track it going back. So one of the things you can do is to change that is by just having a much bigger mouse, so that's easier to see no matter where it is on your screen.
Page change. Slide 11 of 39, high contrast mode.
So, magnification is one thing that's useful to users, but sometimes users need a different type of visual improvement. And this is what we call high contrast mode. So instead of having black letters on a white background, you can change it to where you have white letters on a black background. You can also get and install, say, some Chrome extensions from the Chrome store that will also allow you to, say, modify the colors. For example, if you're red-green blind, you can change the red colors to a color that you can see easier, but more importantly, to be able to differentiate between red and green.
Page change. Slide 12 of 39, highlight the mouse cursor. Text caret.
So another thing you can do is sometimes you may not want to have the magnification or the contrast, but you just need something else to make it a little bit easier to know where the focus is as you're tabbing around, or also to see where the mouse is. So you can do highlighting. And when you do that, for example, and you can choose which one to turn on. So if you do, you can have it when you're tabbing through your content that there'll be a stronger highlight line around, say, the buttons. Or if you've got the highlight for the mouse turned on, when you're moving the mouse, there's a big circle around it that lets you know where it is, and it's easier to track it, but then it'll fade away, so it'll kind of also get out of your way.
Page change. Slide 13 of 39, features for improved motor interactions.
So some of the things we focus on a lot of types of disabilities because you get some people that are visually impaired, but you also have motor impairments.
Page change. Slide 14 of 39, on-screen keyboard.
So one of the things you can do is you can turn on an unscreened keyboard. Then when you do, you can actually type using a mouse, or if you've got a Chromebook with a touchscreen, you can also type into it by touching on the virtual keyboard. You can also type in it using a stylus, and we can do handwriting recognition for what you're actually trying to input into the computer. Yeah. In a couple of ways this can be useful. Say if you're somebody who is paralyzed from, say, the waist up, and say you're using your foot and you have a mouse connected to your foot, this is one way that you can type into your computer and interact with it.
Page change. Slide 15 of 39, physical keyboard and touchpad settings.
The other thing is we also make it easier for people, depending on what you have. Say, sometimes you have someone who has a hard difficulty pushing down on the mouse pad to cause it to click on the content. So you can turn on a different mode where it takes a much lighter touch on the mouse pad to activate the mouse, or to simulate a click. You can also change it to where if you do drag and drop, that you have to also exert less pressure onto the mouse pad in order to click and drag content around. Also, if you're sometimes, depending on your disability, it may be hard to press some of the shortcuts. For example, in Google Slides, one of our shortcuts is press Control, Alt, Shift, F all at the same time. That can be hard to do. So you can turn on what's called sticky mode. So then you can press those keys sequentially and one at a time, and we'll kind of consolidate them together and then do the shortcut as one action instead of 4 independent keystrokes. You can also change the repeat rate so that when by default, when you press a key down, it'll start to repeat that character. But you can change it to where that time that is depressed is much longer. So that gives you a chance to press the key, get it firmly down, and then release it. But instead of typing in a whole bunch of characters, it'll type in just one. So you can change the repeat rate.
Page change. Slide 16 of 39, easy dictation into any text field.
And something that was added, I believe, this last year was more dictation options for edit fields. So when you turn this on, there'll be a little icon that will show up in the system tray that you can activate, or you can also press a shortcut. And when you do, the microphone opens up and you start getting voice to text, and that'll be inserted into the text field for you. And the voice to text is kind of what's happening right now. When I'm typing or when I'm speaking, what I'm saying is being converted into text.
Page change. Slide 17 of 39, make content easier to hear.
So another thing we do is to make sure the content is easier to hear.
Slide 18 of 39, mono audio.
So if you have someone who has lost hearing in one ear, instead of, and if you're listening to something that's in stereo, there's a chance that you'll miss some of that content because it's coming out of the ear that you can't hear out. So you can go in and turn on mono audio, in which case we take both stereo channels, combine them together, and then feed it out to both speakers, be it, say, speakers or even a headphone.
Page change. Slide 19 of 39, spoken feedback.
So here we also offer several ways.
Page change. Slide 20 of 39, Chromebox screen reader.
For doing spoken feedback. So the Chromebox screen reader is actually what you're hearing right now from I'm going from slide to slide. And when you turn on the screen reader, as you're going through your applications or your content, it's contextually aware of what you're doing and will verbalize the information as you go. For example, if I'm tabbing through that and I get to something that's a checkbox, it'll tell me it's a checkbox, but it'll also tell me if it's checked or unchecked. Same thing if I'm getting to something that's a button. It'll say send button so that I know what type it is and then I know how to interact with it. And the same thing if I'm moving through content, that if I can move, say if I'm moving through the content by paragraph, it'll verbalize the entire paragraph. If I'm moving by line, it'll just read the line. Same thing by word or character. So I have the ability to go down and verbalize at the granularity that I want to.
Page change. Slide 21 of 39, lots of Chromebox improvements.
So if you've tried Chromebox, say 4 or 5 years ago, we recommend that you try it again, because in 2017, we released a whole new Chromebox that was completely rewritten from the ground up. And it did a lot of different things better. It was much faster, better performance. We also changed the keyboard interaction model to be easier to use and understand. For example, instead of having to press Control-Alt-H, instead of pressing Control-Alt-N, Control-Alt-H to go to the next heading. Now you press Chromebox plus H. So it's a much easier to use keyboard model. The other thing we've added is what we call ear cons. Ear cons are basically sound that's designed for your ear, whereas icons are designed for your eye. But as you go through that, it'll contextually be aware of it, and it'll give you a different sound for the different types of elements on the page. There'll be a different sound for text, or a checkbox, or a button. We also do it where if you are using, say, headphones, it'll be spatially oriented so that if you're getting onto a button that's on the right side of the page, you'll hear the ear con more through your right ear than you do through the left ear.
Page change. Slide 22 of 39, Chromebox Braille support.
So sometimes, if you're using a screen reader, you do want to have spoken feedback like I'm using here. But a lot of users would actually prefer and need to use a Braille display. So you can hook up a Braille display via USB or Bluetooth, and when you do, then the output, instead of coming to spoken feedback, will be sent to the Braille display. Also, say if you're a teacher or a trainer and you want to know what's going on to the Braille display, you can also have the content that's actually being showed on the Braille display being showed on the top of the screen in Braille, so you can see that, because it's kind of hard to sometimes see what's under somebody's fingers as they're going over the Braille display. But also put it into normal text so that if you don't know Braille, you can also see what's actually being put onto the Braille display. So it's a great aid for learning to use Braille.
Page change. Slide 23 of 39, select to speak.
So sometimes you want to hear content, but you don't want to use a full-blown screen reader. So we also have a feature called Select to Speak. And when you do use this, you go through and you highlight text, and then it'll be read to you. This is a great way to reduce the strain of, say, reading content. It's also a little bit more efficient. But it's also a great proofreading tool. For example, if you're writing an email, use the Select to Speak. Select it, have it read to you. Because hearing the content actually makes it easier to hear things that are different than if you were just reading it. Because when you're reading it, you come a little bit just oblivious to different changes. So just as a tip to yourself, go ahead and use the Select to Speak, because you can find it as a great way to help correct your emails.
Page change. Slide 24 of 39, text-to-speech voices coming from Acapella.
Okay. So the voice that you've been hearing here, it's the one that's offered by Google. We have a couple different variations from this. But some users don't like this text-to-speech voice. So we do offer from third-party vendors like Acapella that you can go out and purchase and install different voices that you can use on your computer. So they can be maybe a little more human-sounding, or they can be ran at a higher speed, because if you're going through a lot of content, you want it. But also, you can maybe match up to somebody's accent, or one that we like in the education space. You can get voices that sound like children. So it's great for somebody who is, say, in grade school. They can get a voice that sounds more like them and their peers.
Page change. Slide 25 of 39, G Suite accessibility features.
So now I'm going to go ahead and switch gears into the G Suite and its accessibility features.
Page change. Slide 26 of 39, G Suite.
So G Suite is our productivity suite of applications for communications, collaboration, and being organized. This includes products like Gmail, Calendar, Drive, Docs, Sheets, Slides, Classroom, Forms, Meet, Chat, and there's a whole bunch more of them. And I don't even know if I can name them all, but I'll just go and stop there. We've also designed these to work on the platform that you're using. Be it a Chromebook with accessibility features turned on, or a Windows laptop, or a Mac laptop. Or you can even use it with Android devices or iOS devices. So we designed it to be, that you can use the technology and the solutions and services that you're used to so that you can go with it. But again, it does work with the accessibility features that I did just cover in the Chrome section earlier.
Page change. Slide 27 of 39, keyboard.
So one of the things we've done is we designed our applications to work with just a keyboard. So if you want, you're not unable or you don't want to use the mouse, you can get by without using it. It's also, keyboard features are a great tool for power users. And we've got a lot of different keyboard features built in. For example, say if you're in Gmail and you want to go see your sent email, just type in the letter G followed by T for go to sent. You can do the same thing in our other applications. You can move around easier, like in Calendar. If you want to add somebody else's calendar, type in the plus sign, and then type in something else to have it auto-completed, and then it'll just automatically work for you. We also have shortcuts to make it quicker to do actions. For example, in Gmail and Calendar, you can press the letter C to start to compose or to create a meeting invite or an email message. You can also do Control B for bolding, or if you're in Gmail or Docs, you can do Control Shift 7 to start to do a numbered list. So there's a lot of shortcuts out there that you can find that you can do when you can't use a mouse, but also if you just want to be more efficient in what you're doing. There's a couple different ways you can find out what these keyboard shortcuts are. There's a small startup out there that created a search engine called Google. Go ahead and take advantage of that. The other thing you can do is inside of our applications, you can bring up a list of shortcuts. In Docs, Sheets, and Slides, it's Control /. So they bring up a list of keyboard shortcuts in that. For our other applications, it's actually Shift +/, which is essentially the question mark. We had to use different ones because if you do Shift / inside Docs, you just typed a question mark into your content. So that's why those are slightly different, and they use the Control +/.
Page change. Slide 28 of 39, application menu shortcuts.
Also in Docs, Sheets, and Slides, we have the application menu, and you open those up on Windows and Chrome OS by pressing Alt, Shift, and then a letter. For example, Alt, Shift, F to open up the File menu, Alt, Shift, E to open up the Edit menu. And also when you open that up, the menu items themselves also have a keyboard accelerator that you can use to actually quickly get to things. For example, if you want to rename a file, you can do it with the shortcut Alt, Shift, F followed by the letter R. So you can quickly move through the menus and get to them. Another thing we've done is sometimes it's still cumbersome to go through those different menus. You can search through the menus for looking for something. For example, you can do Alt / that brings up a little edit box, and you can type into that to search for it. One that I use a lot of times for doing this is if I want to change the first line in my document to a title, instead of going to the Format menu, arrowing down to find the titles and apply it, I actually do the Alt /, type in the word title. That gives you like a short menu of the options that match that, arrow down to apply title case, and hit enter. I find it a much more efficient way to get something that I want. But again, what we believe in is flexibility. So you can use the menus directly, or you can search the menus.
Page change. Slide 29 of 39, voice typing.
One of the powerful features we have in Google Docs is voice typing, editing, and formatting. So when you're in Google Docs, you can turn on the voice where the microphone will listen to you and you can dictate your content into your document. You can also do formatting. You can change things to bold. You can do editing. You can select. You can delete. You can paste things around. You can move it around. So we give you a lot of different capabilities for doing it. I haven't counted them for a while, but when the last times I checked, we had over 150 commands available for the voice typing, editing, formatting. Also in Slides, in the speaker notes, you can do dictation. So you can also just use your voice to say what you want to be in your speaker notes for your slide.
Page change. Slide 30 of 39, magnification.
So by default, most of our applications work with the magnification. If you have turned it on your platform, it'll go ahead and just work within our application. But we do have a couple places where you need to do something more. In Docs, Sheets, and Slides, if you are using the magnification technology, you do have to enable a magnification mode. And something that we just changed a few weeks ago is it used to be to turn this on, you had to know the magical shortcut to turn on screen reader support. And then you had to go into the accessibility settings and change it. We learned that that was not very discoverable for our users. So recently, we've moved those settings into, there's now an accessibility settings dialog that's available under the tools menu, and it's always there. So it's a much more discoverable way of turning on the accessibility features.
Page change. Slide 31 of 39, increased contrast.
Also for the contrast, as you turn it on in your platform, again, that propagates through our application. But sometimes you may want to turn on just one aspect of it. Like in Gmail, you can go in and choose a high contrast theme where you will have, say, white letters on a black background. So you can choose the contrast within the Gmail application. Also in Drive, you can go through and change the color of files and folders to give it maybe a little bit more contrast that you prefer, or to even just change the color so that you can say mark up things in red for the most urgent items that you need to get to.
Page change. Slide 32 of 39, screen reader.
We also support screen readers on all the different platforms. So if you are, say, using an Android device and you turn on TalkBack, we'll be able to use our application using just the TalkBack features that's available. Same thing on iOS with VoiceOver. Or if you're using a Chromebook, you can use this Chromebox screen reader, which is what I'm doing right now. On Mac, we support the VoiceOver screen reader that's built into it. And on Windows, we do support the two popular screen readers, NVDA and JAWS. We do highly recommend that for both of those, you download and install the latest versions of them. So for NVDA, it should be at 2019.1. If you're using JAWS, you should be downloading and using the 2019 version, but also apply the updates that come out every month or two. But if you are using doc sheets and slides, we do also have to enable support for those for the screen readers. So again, you go into the Tools menu and you go to the accessibility settings and turn on screen reader support. The shortcut is still also available to turn on screen reader support by pressing Control-Alt-Z. And the one thing is, if you do open a document and you don't have screen reader support turned on, you're not going to hear any content. So it is important that you do go through and enable the screen reader support.
Page change. Slide 33 of 39, Braille.
We also support using a Braille display. So again, if your platform is set up and the screen reader you're using supports Braille, by default, it works with most of our applications. But again, kind of like the magnification screen reader, there's a common theme here. You have to go into the Tools menu, Accessibility Settings, and turn on Braille support. One thing I do want to mention on the Braille support, though, even if you are using spoken feedback, where you're using text-to-speech synthesizer, you can use that when you have enabled the Braille support, because some users find that gives them an interaction model that they're more used to and they prefer that type of mode. But again, it gives you some flexibility that you can go either way.
Page change. Slide 34 of 39, closed captions.
So closed caption is something that we're doing more and more of. For example, here when I'm in slides, if you're in the presentation mode, you can turn on closed captioning and it'll caption what the speaker is saying. And something that actually got announced yesterday morning in one of the keynotes is in Hangouts Meet, we have now announced that we will be supporting captioning from speakers. So in the different rooms, when people are talking, we can caption it and show it to the person in this location they want to be. So it's also contextual and located to the person that needs that extra support. That functionality will be rolling out over the next couple of weeks or so. Also in, say, Google Drive, if you have a media file that has somebody speaking in it, you can actually go through and caption that content and attach it in a file, then attach it to the media file in Drive. So then when somebody's playing back the media file and they've turned on captioning, they will also get text of what the person is saying as they go through it.
Page change. Slide 35 of 39, content.
So there's actually a couple aspects to accessibility. There's the features that somebody who maybe has a disability needs to use the features themselves. But there's also the side of it that when you're creating content, you need to make sure it's accessible. You want to make sure that's got proper font levels, proper contrast, that it's semantically being marked up as a heading and stuff. And to make that easier in doc sheets, slides, and sites, we've set up our templates and stuff so that by default, you're going to get much more accessible content by using those templates as you go. Another thing we've done for actually making it easier to create content is we've got a shortened URL for creating doc sheets and slides. So if you open up a tab browser and go to docs.new, it'll go ahead and create a Google document for you immediately. So just, again, making it easier to create content so that you can get focused on getting the information produced rather than going through some of the mechanics.
Page change. Slide 36 of 39, demo time.
Okay, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and switch over and do a little bit of a demo.
Landscape. Slide 36 of docked volume. Sticky mode enabled. 9:30 a.m. Sticky mode disabled.
Okay, so I did a time check to see where I am, so I'm in good shape. So one of the things I talked about earlier was in Chrome, that you've got all these different accessibility features. And you may be wondering, okay, great. Now how do I get to those? So what you want to do is go to the Chrome and bring up the Chrome settings. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and create a new tab.
Address and search bar. Edit text, URL entry. Exited application.
And I'm going to Chrome://settings.
Calendar.o unselected. Chrome. Web content. Settings. Settings. Search settings. Edit text search entry.
So I'm on the edit field and I'm just going to type in accessibility.
Search settings. Settings. Banner. Search settings. Accessibility.
So it should have a couple results.
Clear search. Always show accessibility options in the system menu. Toggle button. Not pressed. Exited banner.
So the one thing you can do is if it's something where you're going to be changing your settings frequently, you can actually change the setting here and actually have another icon added to your system tray to quickly get to your accessibility settings. Or I can go ahead and tap again.
Manage accessibility features. Button. Back. Button. Press search plus.
So now I've brought up the section that has all your accessibility features. So I'm just going to go ahead and just tab through a few of these.
Learn more. Link. Press search plus space to activate. Enable Chromebox spoken feedback. Toggle button. Press. Press search plus space to toggle.
So this one's turned on. And I'm going to go ahead and leave it on because otherwise it'll be a little bit difficult for me to do the demo.
Open Chromebox settings. Button. Press enable select to speak. Toggle button. Not pressed. Text to speech voice settings. Button. Select and customize text. Use high contrast mode. Toggle button. Not enable full screen magnifier. Toggle button. Not.
So I'm not going to go through all of them, but this is the way that you can get to all the different accessibilities that are built into every Chromebook that's out there. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and go into Docs. So here, I'm going to again go to the URL bar.
Address and search bar. Chrome://
And I just did that by typing in Control-L. Now I'm going to type in just docs.new.
Drive. Enable full screen magnifier. Toggle button. Not pressed. Settings. Manage accessibility features. Main. Settings. Manage accessibility feature. Sticky mode enabled. Untitled document. Google sticky mode disabled.
So now I've got an untitled document, and it was just a really quick way to do that. So earlier I was talking about the accessibility features that's built into Google Docs. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the Tools menu.
Tools. Menu item. 6 of 9. Expanded.
I'm going to arrow down to Accessibility Settings.
Menu. Spelling S right pointer. Menu. Word count W menu. Review suggested edits menu. Explore R Control plus Alt plus menu. Dictionary D menu. Translate document menu. Voice typing menu. Script editor menu. Preferences menu. Accessibility settings C. Accessibility settings.
So just press Enter to open it up. Now I've got a dialog of the accessibility features that's built into Docs, Sheets, and Slides. And once you set this in Docs, these settings do carry over to both Slides and to Sheets. So I'm just going to tab through a couple of these.
Turn on screen reader support. Checkbox. Check. Required for Braille support.
And you see that one's already checked.
Learn more about turn on Braille support. Checkbox. Not checked. Works with third.
And I've got the Braille support turned off. And then we also have the magnification. So let me go ahead and hit Escape to get out of this.
Document content.
Now I'm going to just type in some content here.
C-L-U-D-T. New line. New line. L-N-S. New line. N-S-O. New line. T-O-K-Y-O. New line. L-N-N. New line.
So now I'm just going to go ahead and go kind of review what I just typed in.
London. Tokyo. San Francisco. Locations. New line. Cloud next.
So again, it's just very simple to go through that. Let me go down to the bottom.
New line. New line. New line.
Let me demo the actual voice typing.
Voice typing turned on.
Hope to see you at the next Cloud Next.
Voice typing turned off. New line. Typing turned on to see you at the next Cloud Next. New line. Typing turned on to see you at.
And you notice that it actually did the voice to text of actually what the screen reader was saying as well. So if you're going to be using a screen reader, we do recommend that you go ahead and turn on the, or use headphones if you're going to be using the voice typing. Okay, let me go ahead and just rename this real quick.
File. Menu item. Rename. Cloud Next. Selected. Edit text.
And you notice there when I did that, it actually put the first line into here, so I could just quickly hit enter.
Document content. Text area. Use search left or right.
Okay. So at this point, I'm actually going to go ahead and copy the URL because I'm going to use it here when I go into Gmail.
Address in search bar. Copy https:// meet the document content. Text area. Cloud next. Google Docs.
So I'm actually switching over to the Gmail
next,
application.
Google Docs. Unread. Google. Security alert. 6:57 a.m. New device sign.
So technically, I just signed into a different laptop.
Unread. Adam Black. Next 19. April 10th. Where Adam Black. Hello. April 10th. Did the presentation go well?
So I'm going to go ahead and open this up.
Print all in new window. Hello inbox. Remove label. Adam.
I'm going to hit in to go to it, and it'll read the information.
April 10th. 7 p.m. 14 hours ago. Reply more to me. Show details. Did the presentation go well? Suggested reply. It went well. Suggested reply. It was good. Suggested reply. Yes. Very good.
So that also showed me different options that I could use for smart replies. So I quickly replied to this. But in this case, I'm going to go ahead and reply to it directly. In this case, I'm using the shortcut A because I want to do a reply to all.
Message body. Text area. Row 1.
So now I'm going to type in yes.
Yes. It.
I just typed in the word IT in space. And now I'm going to type in just the letter W.
Suggested text went well.
And then our Smart Compose suggested text for me. So if I want this, I can go ahead and hit Tab.
Inserted suggestion went well.
Which is great.
New line.
And now we can go ahead and tab over to the Send button.
Send Control Enter. Send Control Enter. Disabled. Button. Alert. Sending ellipsis.
So that was just a really quick
message.
Some quick demos of using, some of the features that I was just talking about.
Alert.
So let me go ahead and switch back to my presentation.
A copy of CP116G.
Let me go back into presentation mode.
View. Menu. Present P Control plus F5. Menu. View. Menu item. 3 of 11. Volume.
Okay, at this point, I'm going to go through some of the resources that's available.
Page change. Slide 37 of 39. Resources. Page change. Slide 38 of 39. Communication. Page change.
Go back up. So there's a lot that I did cover here, and there's no way for even me, anybody to remember all the information. So we actually have a lot of great resources online, and one of the key ones is to go to google.com/accessibility, where you're going to find information about some of the things, how we do things, but information about the accessibility of our products, including the Chromebook itself, G Suite, but other products like Android or Mail, or even the Google search products on home. We also have a lot of Help Center articles available. So you go to g.co/help/accessibility. Starting to lose my voice, so I'm going to have to get to Q&A here pretty quick. All right, there's also, for specific to, say, Chromebook, you can go to support.google.com/Chromebook. We also have created some getting started videos. Laura Allen, who is the accessibility program manager for Chrome, created some getting started videos on Chromebooks that goes in through all the features in more detail. I've created some getting started videos for Drive, Docs, Sheets, and Slides. And you can find those videos as well as the Help Center articles in g.co/G Suite Accessibility. But even if there are great resources,
Page change.
sometimes you actually want to get in touch with somebody. So a couple of things you can do is you can go track me down at conferences and ask me questions, which can be a little bit time consuming and maybe a little bit expensive. But also we have different sources. Something we've been doing a lot more investing over the last year and a half or so is to create a disability support team. And we now offer the ability for you to get in contact with somebody who can answer your questions on any Google product. You can do that through email. You can also do it through live chat. And here recently, we've added the support where you can have a phone call with somebody, or say if you're using the Be My Eyes application on Android or iOS devices, you can actually have like a video call with somebody, which is great because they can not only say see what you're looking at and answer questions, but they can also hear it if you're using a screen reader. We also have some mailing lists that you can actually communicate with some of the people at Google, but also the community out there, because there's a lot of people who also have great answers to your questions. So you can connect to, say, Chromebook-accessibility@googlegroups.com or accessible@googlegroups.com, which is the one that's more geared towards G Suite. You can also connect to chromebox-discuss at googlegroups.com. But again, a lot of these things, for the support, g.co/disability support, or again, the main accessibility webpage, google.com/accessibility, and you get to a lot of information that way.